Right, I'll take it from the top. Hello, everyone. I'm Will, otherwise known as Alleyway Jack, and in today's episode, we're doing something a little bit different, a little bit fun, perhaps, as we are getting into the festive season, but hopefully something that's still a little bit edifying too. Joining me today are my first ever guests on the channel, also in their own right, esteemed members of the Final Fantasy community and YouTubers in their own way. So I'm joined firstly by Nukvi. Say hello, Nukvi. And
Hello.
also Peter. Hi, Peter.
Hello.
Together they form the illustrious Birds of Play. Nukvi, would you like to give a little taster of what your channel is about?
So we taste very nice, and we make Final Fantasy videos about a lot of different things. Maybe our most famous videos are our summary videos, but we also make some more analytical videos, some inspired by the one and only Alleyway Jack, like character analysis, or sometimes we do language analysis, looking into the Japanese language and translation differences. So if you're interested in some of that, please go check us out. And if you just want more Will, more Alleyway Jack, check out our podcast we did with him over on the channel about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So I hope to see you there.
Excellent. Thank you. So, thank you for joining me today, guys. As I say, you've politely, kindly, and bravely decided to come in somewhat blind to what we're going to be discussing today, which is going to be a Final Fantasy character tier list. Now, to mix things up a bit, because I think it's very easy to have consensus and choose who our favorite characters are, what we've done is decided to randomize it. And instead, I want you to use your imagination and picture yourself going up the cable car to the Gold Saucer, and we arrive at the Wonder Square and discover this really fun-looking game called Cait Sith's Wheel of Fun. And this is going to be the randomizer that is going to determine which characters we have to discuss. How does that sound to you guys?
Sounds amazing.
Sounds amazing, yeah.
Okay.
I can already see some interesting names there.
Yeah. I put a whole 35 minutes into building this, so
Yeah.
I hope you enjoy it. Okay, let's
Let's
go.
spin the wheel.
This is our date with Alleyway Jack at the Gold Saucer.
Freya Crescent from Final Fantasy IX.
Okay.
Cait Sith says, "Oh, this is I like the ambition. This is very old."
So I think Freya has a dedicated fan base, at least.
I have found that.
Both because she's a good character in her own right, and also because there is maybe a particular group of people who like people like her, rat people.
Yes.
She's the original furry, yeah, in some
Yeah.
ways.
I would also like to add that she has inspired other things outside of Final Fantasy IX. For example, in My Hero Academia, seems to be a rat character based on her, because the author of My Hero Academia is known for being a Final Fantasy IX fan and has done some Final Fantasy IX fan art. So this is also educational, if you
That
didn't
is
know
very
that.
interesting.
Yeah.
I've also just
Yeah, you came prepared.
I've just started watching My Hero Academia, and I'm actually a big fan of that. It has no bearing on
But
my
one
pick right now, but
one thing I will say that detracts from my admiration or appreciation for Freya is that she starts out strong as she arrives into the story, but then it sort of fades out. We don't
Yeah.
really get much of her after Burmisia and Clara.
I got you.
So
Yeah.
Mm.
And I think I feel like they I mean, Final Fantasy IX very much worked in that pattern that 7 and a lot of the older games have, which is where you kind of have a hometown location that's dedicated to an individual sort of character in the party. Whereas with some of the characters, they sort of tended to tick along and their arc came to some sort of fruition later, whereas others it dropped off. And I think Freya's was one of the ones where it sort of dropped off, which was a shame because she had a really potent, tragic arc. You know, she lost her hometown. She had this amnesic former lover, Sir Fratley, who doesn't remember her by the end of the game still. So I really like that. She had quite a brutal storyline, and she did tug the heartstrings a little bit for me. My case for her is that she's also a Dragoon. I love the Dragoon class of character, so I think her skill set's wicked. And yeah, I think her design's fantastic.
Mhm. Yeah. I would argue that she is an A tier character.
Okay, that's where I was sort of sitting as well. Peter?
I like her silly little hat, so I agree with the A. I
It
think.
warrants an A. Okay, we're going A for Freya. Boop.
That was amazing.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I foresee a pattern of games from 7 to maybe 10 being maybe on the upper side of things, but we'll see. We'll see what characters we get.
Yeah.
Great.
Mhm.
Okay, now if I've done this correctly, she should be removed from the wheel. She has been. Excellent. So we go again.
Wait! You made this wheel from scratch? I'm just looking at the URL, the URL.
Yeah, it's a local. Yeah.
God damn.
Yeah.
Okay.
Renoa Hatton.
So before we maybe get into Renault, I want to just share that for my first Final Fantasy VIII playthrough, I called her Aurora. So I renamed her. So it took me a while to warm up to the Renoa name, even though I've completely transferred to that.
I would like
now.
to delve into this a little bit more because I think it tells us a lot about Nukvi. Why did you choose the name Aurora?
Maybe it was just my sort of budding English trying to bloom. Like I didn't understand what Renoa would be, and it doesn't have to be anything. But Aurora was something that I could sort of understand or latch on to.
Okay. I can get behind that. I respect that. It's just because when I was a kid in Final Fantasy VII, I used to name all the characters after my friends at school, and then the girls would be named after my crutches at school. And then
Nice.
I was doubly upset when Aerith got killed. So
Susie.
Okie dokie. So we've got Renoa here. How do we feel about Renoa, and where do we feel she's going to rank?
Renoa is, of course, quite pivotal to the plot of Final Fantasy VIII. She's a character that maybe not everyone will like right away. She's sort of outgoing, and even Squall doesn't get her at first. But at least on my part, she is someone I warmed up to completely, and I would place her very high on this list.
I'm thinking, yeah, because to me, in my memory, she, she's a hot girl that Squall crushes on, but in comparison to like Freya's backstory, sort of, it's a lot more drawn out through the entire game, and
yeah, I think she has a very fruitful arc. I mean, it's there, it's apparent, and I think a lot of misconceptions about Renoa, and I had them as well when I sort of first started, not necessarily playing the games, but analyzing them. As I was like, well, she's almost. I think some people perceive her as like a prop who sort of propels Squall's arc forward and makes his, because he goes from this stoic, closed off guy to this open guy, and it's because of her. But I think she's so much more than that. I really think she actually has her own dilemmas to contend with, becoming a sorceress, all of that sort of thing. And I think some of the most potent scenes in the game involve Renoa, particularly the one where she's lost in space and like the Griever rings floating up and stuff. It was like, yeah, it was. I think she's a great character. My only contestations against her, and again, this goes back to my naivety and when I was younger playing the game. Some of the frustrations I had with her was she was this idealistic. She was too idealistic for me, and I've since changed my perspective on that because you have to appreciate they are like 17-year-olds. Of course, they've got this youthful idealism and stuff, but where they plop down on the floor and try and hatch a new plan. I was very much on Squall's side there, where he's just like, "What kind of outfit is this?" It wasn't very professional. And also, on the grounds of animal cruelty, I don't think you should be shooting dogs out of cannons.
Propelling dogs, yeah, as projectiles, yeah. You convinced me, yeah, like, because I slept on 8 for a while. Like, I played it through the first time, actually, like, within the last 10 years or something. So I don't have the childhood connection to Renoa, which I think gives me maybe a clearer vision and to be the judge of this stuff. But now that you mention it, of course, she has some amazing scenes and very sort of iconic moments in Final Fantasy VIII that I think should propel her upwards on this list without
But do
naming any
you
letters.
but do you guys remember when she locked the team in and
Yeah.
went off to face the sorceress by herself?
Exactly, and this is what I mean by the naivety, because it's like her vendetta against Fury Caraway, her father, and stuff, really like threw a spanner in the works, and that just it did grind my gears at the time. I was like, the whole reason
Yeah,
those
yeah, yeah.
through those sewers with Quistis is because Renoa's had a
Yeah.
spat with her father.
Yeah, I felt like you addressed that sort of minus fairly well before, and you reminded me of a plus. I think it's because Renoa is also tied up to this whole sort of generational aspect of Final Fantasy VIII, where we have not only Squall and Renoa, but also Laguna and
Julia.
Yeah, Julia. Yeah, yeah. So we have a sort of generational romance in a way, which I find quite appealing.
Yes, I'm gonna hazard an A.
I was leaning towards S, but I understand we might be saving that for something extra special. In my mind, I would place Renoa above Freya, but maybe they belong to the same category. I'm not opposed to it being an A.
The problem is right now that we have two very strong characters on the list, and if we had someone from I think the more recent games, it would be more. This should probably be no contest than S. But we have these two on right now, and they're both quite strong, and they have good backstories. But I am leaning towards an A in this context. But there are characters like in Final Fantasy 16, which sort of, I would say, pale in comparison to Renoa, without naming any names. But as the board stands now, I would put her on par with Freya, which
Okay,
so that's two against one. I'm afraid.
And I'm moving to A as well.
Right.
Oh, all right.
Next spin.
Who are we getting next?
Fran.
It's going to be all A.
It's a very Dino-centric wheel at the moment, but yeah. Okay. Fran from Final Fantasy 12.
Hey, interesting. Okay. I have
the Freya of Final Fantasy 12.
We keep getting the furries.
But worse.
Okay.
Famously, Fran has a supposedly an Icelandic accent, which is of course very dear to our hearts. I didn't understand that it was an Icelandic accent at the time.
No, also because she was supposed to have an Icelandic accent, but she doesn't have an Icelandic accent.
Right, that makes sense.
And then in Final Fantasy 14, they rectified the fact that the Viera are supposed to have Icelandic accents.
Yeah. We are from Iceland.
We are from Iceland, yes.
We're from Iceland. I thought she was really hot in FF12, and I think that merits some points.
Yes, she is.
Yeah. I wasn't going to go that shallow that quickly, but yeah.
I mean, it's a factor.
Her design appeals to me, and I would argue that it's not simply sexual. It's also just... Sorry, you said she was hot. That's basically the same thing. And no, I'm saying her design is cool, but it is very sexualized. So I would understand some people being opposed to that or finding that unappealing. I don't have a problem with it myself, but maybe if I were playing this game with my wife, I can picture her being like, "Why is that woman dressed like that?"
I think I've heard someone say, "Why does she look like a Playboy bunny?" And I never made that connection. But maybe on some level, that is where it's been targeted. I don't know. I think her design is fantastic, though. What I like about the Viera is that they are kind of analogs to existent. Like they probably remind us of something, and we can't initially put our finger on it. But they are sort of analogs to like the elves in Lord of the Rings and stuff. You know, they're these woodland creatures that have this sort of heightened sense of things and stuff. So I really liked just how they were sort of a very interestingly designed allegory for a Tolkien sort of character class. And yeah, I also think her role in the story, she does have that sort of esoteric wisdom about things and stuff. So I thought she was pretty cool for the story. And she has that crazy transformation thing as well. And actually, another thing, again, you mentioned My Hero Academia with Freya. There's a slightly more antiquated anime called Outlaw Star, which is one of these Japanese sort of space westerns, like Cowboy Bebop. And there was a character there called Aisha Clan, who basically the design was almost identical to Fran's, and she transformed into a crazy beast when she got angry. So I was like, that's a clear nod to Outlaw Star, which is one of my favorite animes of all time. So that's another reason why Fran ranks really highly for me. Play devil's advocate, I think her relevance to the story is tenuous at best. And I think that's, aside from being eye candy and a pretty cool character, like, I would argue her role in the story is.
I was going to say that, like, yeah. So she has so much potential to be the sort of fish out of water. So she is the only Viera we sort of see walking around in the open world, but she doesn't pull like a Kimari Ronso, like my people do it like this. Not often. So I feel like she could have given us a better perspective or a new perspective on a lot of events, but she sort of didn't, and which sort of delegates her, as you say, to more eye candy.
Yeah.
But I think she was her relationship with Balthier was interesting, but ultimately pretty unexplored.
Her relationship with Balthier, although it was unexplored, I thought their sort of back and forth or the dynamics between them were quite interesting and appealing. Of course, being sort of similar to Han Solo and Chewbacca as well from Star Wars, so it's not just Outlaw Star. There are a lot of sort of Star Wars parallels between Final Fantasy XII and Star Wars. But yeah, so she could have been utilized better, I think, like Peter was mentioning as well.
I think Fran, with respect to story and her overall contribution, I would place C.
I was going to say
for
C.
Chewbacca.
Yeah.
Yep, C for Chewbacca.
Okay. I was leaning towards B, but we can go C. Yes.
Okay.
That's very magnanimous of you.
Okay. Yes.
Next up.
Yeah, I think C is good because it gives us more space to work with as well.
Okay, we have Broden from Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and I did not.
I'm going to just be quiet and let Nucky talk about Broden because he loves Broden.
Okay, so can I just lay the groundwork here? But as the guys have mentioned, I've recently joined them in their channel, and we have talked through Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And somehow, without fail, Nukvi has indulged conversation about Broden in most of those episodes, at least a passing reference to Broden. So please explain.
No, so in a game like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, where one of the sort of biggest turn-offs for me are the side characters, Broden is at least a sort of visually interesting character that you're introduced to fairly early in the game. So in Calm, where you start off, we meet Broden, and you can at least imagine someone that might want to get to know this person. His design is somewhat interesting. He seems to have some dark past that we learn about through the side quests. And compared to other side characters in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, he is pretty high up on the list. Whether that makes him high up on a list like this is a different question, though. But he is sort of the one who is pulling the side characters in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth.
Okay, fair enough. So I would agree to the extent, in terms of side characters in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, he probably stands out among the most. He also has a sort of arc because we see him much later in the game, and what happens to him and stuff. So I was like, yeah. So I could sort of concede he does have more relevance than a lot of the side characters in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I probably don't like him quite to the extent that you do, but yeah, but he was okay. Peter, did you have any opinions?
I mean, I barely remember him. I played through the main story and sort of tried to stick with that this time around and during this playthrough. And just like, even though, yes, he has a less generic design than most of the sort of NPCs we meet, I would say that on the scale that we're working on here, I would place him very quite low. I don't think he sadly has a chance to go higher than E.
I would argue for E, and with that in mind, most of the other side characters in Rebirth would be an F.
Yes, fair
Right?
play.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go E with Broden.
That's really generous,
That is,
but I'll
exceedingly
accept it.
Broden is amazing. He's my bro.
I don't know if we made the case, but I'll okay.
Sephiroth.
Sephiroth.
Oof.
Mm,
Please name the letter before we justify it.
I'm going to say
Nothing.
S. I think there's good reason why he has the reputation he does.
I'm gonna say S, but there are many things that detract from
He has
how
demerits.
amazing he is. Yeah.
I think it would be very difficult to not say S. That's not saying that he's a perfect character, but let's get into it. Yeah, who wants to start?
One thing people might find an issue with is that we don't really maybe understand completely where Sephiroth begins and Genova ends, and to what extent we are sort of just glorifying Genova in the form of Sephiroth. But my sort of main problem recently has more to do with the compilation than the original Final Fantasy VII, because what Sephiroth is and what he is doing is sort of up in the air still, even though we now have 2 installments of the remake series. So his sort of the driving forces behind his character aren't apparent and therefore aren't very appealing at the moment. So hopefully they will finish strong with the 3rd installment. But at the moment he's sort of up in the air along with the games, I think.
Sure. Peter, anything?
Yeah, I'll just really quickly sort of. I mean, so as a kid, he was without a doubt the coolest villain I had ever seen, and I think that applies to a lot of people. He was very mysterious. He's mysterious as well in the new compilation games, but in a different way. I sort of enjoyed the mysteriousness of the original better, where you don't see nearly as much of him, and he's very sort of mythical for a long while, and you talk about him and you hear stories, but he's not showing up a lot. And I think that's I appreciate that more. Not that it's not fun to see him now in the cutscenes, but I thought he was very cool.
Yeah. No.
Wow.
That's a great point. And actually, it was exactly what I was going to say, to be honest with you. I think the way they built him in the first game, the original game, was like phenomenal. You barely see him, and yet they've built this reputation of a character in your mind.
Yeah.
Things such as we discussed on the podcast about seeing the snake impaled, and you don't see Sephiroth, you just see the reputation preceding him. So I thought that was brilliantly structured. I do concede on Nucky's point that what they're doing with him at the moment remains to be seen. And I think there was some pushback over seeing him so frequently compared to the original, like particularly in Remake, the first installment, we see him constantly. However, I don't think that's enough to diminish his reputation and what he's contributed to the Final Fantasy VII mythos and actually gaming at large. So I don't think it's enough to diminish him away from an S tier.
Yeah. Just to add a little bit to that, so I thought they also handled him very well in Crisis Core, and it was very interesting and good for me to see him, the side of him where he was more quote unquote human, and he was chatting with Zack, and that was a side that I think added a lot to him. So that's just more points to move him up.
Yeah.
Who's next?
Ignis.
So one thing that I think of right away is that they had the opportunity to sort of play with his character development in a much more meaningful way in regards to his blindness. That sort of gets sort it out through the power of friendship in a way. They just go for a cave exploration, and then it's all fine. But I like Ignis.
This is sort of what I mean with like we're putting up these newer characters with the older characters. Like Ignis is fine, but like his backstory sort of falls flat. And I like that he cooks and he has a cool voice and he has spiky hair, but like that's not really tugging at my heartstrings. And the blindness, that's an interesting dimension, but it didn't really seem to detract from his life standard of living at all. He just had a cane or something.
Yeah.
Ignis is my favorite character out of the three who are following Noctis.
Yeah, I would say it's probably mine as well.
So one of my biggest problems with Final Fantasy 15, even though I love Final Fantasy 15, is how they removed the meaning of food that seemed to be in the original version of the game. Because we have a trailer where, or an old teaser where we have King Regis and Noctis sitting eating soup, and Noctis gets something green on his tongue, and he's like, I don't like the soup. And the king is like, you should eat your food lest the cook gets sent away. So it's sort of a part of their service to the people to not be a picky eater in a way. It sort of becomes symbolic.
Yeah.
But that is not present in the final game. And so the meaning of Ignis and him being a cook sort of gets lost in a way.
We have a scale now. So is he more interesting than Fran?
Yeah.
We have now placed Fran at C. Discuss.
I would place Ignis above Fran. He contributes more to the story. And like we were talking about with Fran, her relationship with Balthier isn't explored all that much, but in Final Fantasy XIV, the relationship or the dynamics between the four guys is sort of the meat on the bones. In 15 years.
And in a way, it's almost unfair to sort of signal Ignis out because he is a part of a whole. I really liked him. I was taken aback by the blindness thing when that first happened. And I thought, and the fact that they pursued it as well, I was like, oh, they'll fix him somehow. They didn't.
Yeah.
So
if people are interested, there is an academic paper that has been written about Ignis's blindness and how it depicts disabilities in video games, written by Rachel Hutchinson. And I have also written partly about the sort of anime tropes in Final Fantasy 15, where we have Ignis being this glasses person, Megane, and the other guys also being stand-ins for these sort of anime archetypes as well.
Make your choice, brother.
So I would maybe place him at B, mostly because Rinoa is an A. I might place him in the same category as Freya, but yeah.
I can meet you with B.
I was thinking B as well. We've wedged him. We've made the sort of space between the scale between Rinoa and Fran, which is this is going great. We're all of the same mind,
and I'm having fun.
Irving Kineas.
Just sort of to me, he's on the same level as Broden. Like I never made any connection with Irvine.
So Irvine for me is A. And sort of whether you can learn to love Irvine sort of depends on whether you can learn to love every aspect of Final Fantasy VIII, because he is sort of quite integral to quite big plot points in Final Fantasy VIII. And if you can learn to love those plot points, you have to love Irvine as well.
Oof.
Okay, I love Final Fantasy VIII. It's my favorite game by far and away. However, I feel some of the negatives that you have to concede that come out of Final Fantasy VIII, Irvine seems to be attached to at least some of them, particularly that basketball scene. So I feel like I want to put him as a D.
D?
Yeah.
But like, So it's such a powerful moment, and it's so rewarding for the player to sort of puzzle it together themselves. What Irvine is sort of going through during the sniper scene at the end of disc 1.
Yes.
Because a big part of the way Final Fantasy VIII tells its story is not through like directness. It's sort of off the beaten path in a way, and a part of sort of really coming to terms with that is piecing it together, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you know, a lot of the characters, most of the characters in this game, and Final Fantasy VIII has been accused of not having diverse characters in terms of like everything's about Squall and Renoa. They don't have backstories, they don't have any arc, but they do. And I've spoken about this at length. They all sort of have these facades, how they present themselves versus who they actually are. Irving's is a very important one, which is that he presents himself as cool and confident, and then when he's presented with, pressure, which is the assassination mission, he just cracks completely. And that was a really interesting scene. That was a great scene. However, what I would argue is that most, if not all of the party members sort of evolve and mature and kind of come out of this when they're confronted with who they really are, whereas Irving potentially doesn't. So if we look at the Galbadia prison sequence that comes next, he's trying to leave the party behind. He doesn't give a shit about them. He's taking Renoa to Caraway.
Mm-hmm.
My point is Irving just a douchebag that doesn't learn his lesson?
So is he a douchebag for not infiltrating a high security prison by himself, or is that a reasonable thing to expect someone not to do? But okay, so maybe I would place him a bit lower. I would maybe place him at C, because I don't particularly like his personality. I think he brings some really powerful moments to Final Fantasy VIII, but he is a very obnoxious guy.
That's sort of my one and only argument here. It's like, I don't really like him, and I think that matters when choosing your favorite characters. Like,
okay, we can meet at C for Irving.
C.
See, we met in the middle, and no one's happy. Great.
Cloud Strife.
Okay.
Heavy hitters.
Cloud is very well liked. He's very iconic, but he's also very misunderstood by the majority of players, I think, because they don't understand that what he's doing is, to a large extent, a facade he's putting on to act like the guy he imagines others would find appealing. In some cases, Tifa would find appealing. So he's not that cool guy. He is this sort of shy child.
Exactly. But that's what makes him S tier for me. Because I think, the sort of audience you're thinking about are the sort of people that watch Fight Club and think that Brad Pitt's character is the protagonist and that's the way to go. It's like, no, watch that film to the end. It's not. It's about vulnerabilities and things like this. It's kind of similar to Cloud Strife. You can't look at a guy and be like, look at his big badass sword and he's a badass. It's like, it's not about him being a badass at all. It's about, he's a very vulnerable character that is undergoing kind of severe trauma, and it's his journey kind of out of that, which is what makes him so cool.
And for me, that places him above Sephiroth in a way. I find Cloud's personal sort of struggles more appealing than Sephiroth's. Sephiroth is, of course, interesting for different reasons, but I find Cloud's personal journey to be more interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, Cloud has the best of both worlds, really. He's got one of the most iconic designs in video game history. He's got the hair, he's got the sword, but he's also, as it turns out, got this emotional journey in this side, and this genuine side that we saw more of in Rebirth, where he sort of cracked through how insecure he really is, and he sort of doesn't really have full confidence in what he's doing. And he's got it all, man. Yeah. It's cool, and it's also interesting as a person.
To the eternal credit of Square and the writing team on that game, the fact that they permitted him also to be humorous, and you dress up as a girl to infiltrate Don Corneo's mansion. There was just absolute humor there as well. So he was such a broad spectrum in how he was written. I thought it was great. So S tier. Clive Rosehill.
Whoa, okay.
Oh, jeez, we're not messing around.
This is pressure for our Final Fantasy 16 podcast, which we will do
Coming
later.
soon, TM. I like Clive more than Ignis. I'll say that straight away.
Yeah. I'm
Yes,
leaning
discuss.
I'm leaning towards an A
Why?
because I really like Clive, but I don't know if I like him more than I like characters like Rinoa and Freya, and I don't know if I like him as much as I like characters as Cloud and Sephiroth.
Are we doing which character do we like the most, or which character is the best character?
No, but we've established a pattern here, so I feel like I have to subscribe to. Okay,
Because if it's like, I would put Irvine like at the bottom.
Liking is of course a factor, but there's a lot of factors. So Final Fantasy 16 has a lot of characters, and I don't think they all work. But I think Clive is one of the ones that actually really does work. Yeah, I think his arc is very interesting, and I think his sort of personal journey and coming to terms with who he is and what he's done and all that stuff. It worked for me. More than Ignis becoming blind.
Yeah, he's above Ignis. It's either S or A for me. There are some maybe problems I have with the way just Final Fantasy 16 story is told overall that sort of limit my appreciation of Clive as a character. For example, the time skip. Like if we would have gotten to see more of his time in Sandbreak, for example.
I don't think he quite reaches the heights of an all-time classic great Final Fantasy character in comparison with Cloud and Sephiroth, which we have on this list. But I don't think he goes below A.
Yeah, I don't think he goes below A at all.
No, I would place him above Rinoa, for example.
Well, that's not the scale we have. So
no, I'm just saying that I wouldn't go below Rinoa or Freya with Clive. So I really appreciate sort of, even though I don't usually go in for the whole voice actor thing, but Ben Starr is really appealing, and he sort of makes me like Clive even more. He's an ally.
He's an ally
to the Final Fantasy 8 community.
I saw him wearing a Final Fantasy 8 t-shirt one time, so I was like, yeah, that guy.
Yeah,
we've agreed on A. Let's.
Okay, we're going.
Right?
Yeah, we're okay. Yeah, I'm having a genuinely good time.
Zach Fair.
Is that getting?
Fuck's sake.
Okay.
Ooh. I think the same applies to Zack and Sephiroth, the first game. That Zack is sort of like much talked about, seldom seen, and I think that worked well in the original game. But I think they really did it. They did it really well when they his representation in Crisis Core.
Yes.
He's a very charming guy, and everyone instantly likes him, and the audience as well. There are many things to be said about his utilization in Rebirth. Not all of them good, but Zack very quickly rose in my esteem with the extended sort of universe, and I would put him above Ignis, but we can't.
So. Part of me would like to put Zack at S because I really liked him and his mysterious in the original, even though it doesn't do a lot. And how he was handled in the Crisis Core was phenomenal, I think. But he is so underutilized in Rebirth, and
this is just what I said, man.
Yeah. But so the payoff of him being Rebirth didn't really pay off, I felt. So that detracts from his character for me personally a little bit. So I'm leaning towards A.
I think for the reasons you've outlined, I'm leaning towards A as well. I think as a mystery in the original game, he was fantastic. I was actually really skeptical about when they announced Crisis Core. I was like, does he need explaining? Are they going to mess it up? And then actually they delivered more than I could have ever expected on Zack in Crisis Core. I thought it was fantastic. But do I think he's S tier, especially off the back of Rebirth? Maybe not. So I think I'd go A.
He's with Clive. He's in good company.
Yeah.
And Freya, I guess.
Freya deserves that A. Sorry.
Renova. Okay, done. What's done is done.
We can't change it.
No.
Yeah, a lot of Final Fantasy VII here. So
Okay.
Genova. Interesting. What is Genova?
So what I'll say first is that I sort of grew to like Genova more through the compilation material, especially the book "The Kids Are All Right," because in that book, the sort of shape-shifting aspect of her is explored a bit more. I felt, where she is sort of turning into dead people in a way, but like I was mentioning with Sephiroth before. Like who is Genova, who is Sephiroth, sort of modeled, and maybe that's not really a problem because that maybe, even though it might detract from my appreciation of Sephiroth, it maybe adds to my appreciation of Genova because she is mysterious and she is sort of all-encompassing in terms of what her being is and how her being seeks to be reunited in a way. And I find the reunion concept, for example, is very appealing to me.
It's
I
fantastic.
think if you asked 100 people, like, who are your favorite Final Fantasy VII characters, I'd think you'd be hard pressed to find people who would say, "Oh, I love Genova," like as a character.
Yeah.
Like it's like a concept. It's like the Blight in Final Fantasy 16. It's not really a character, but
I think that's precisely where the appeal of Genova comes from, because it's not the Blight. They personified it to an extent that I find really interesting. I think how, in fact, actually the image we've got here, where it's appearing in the guise of what Sephiroth might perceive to be a mother, because it's like that's how it shapeshifts and sort of manipulates people. I thought that was super cool, which is what in part leads to this intrigue as to who's in control of what, where. So yeah, I think Genova's pretty cool. You can't really picture Final Fantasy VII without its inclusion. It would just fall flat on its face, and it would become a generic good guy versus bad guy. Now you have this malign force in the mix. I thought it was cool.
But but I also understand like what Peter was talking about. If we imagine like Sin being on this list, for example, for Final Fantasy X, like it's pivotal to Final Fantasy X, but it's so difficult to think about it as a character.
looking at this list, I would say I like Genova more than Broden, but less than Fran.
So we're thinking D.
I was thinking A actually.
We cannot put Genova at A. People will riot.
Okay, so
I think we've all made good cases to why it's an interesting concept and all that stuff, but ultimately it's a character tier list, and I don't think we can put her higher than some more fleshed out characters with.
Okay, I see what you're saying, because if we do it, we are just falling into her trap. So to save the planet, we're going D.
Success.
S tier.
Yeah, agreed. Next.
Okay.
So it's of course not as culturally well known as Sephiroth and Cloud. He doesn't have the same sort of claim to being iconic, but he is one of the best characters in one of my favorite games.
Yeah.
Okay, but let me put it to you that he is a poltergeist that comes back and manipulates two teenagers into falling in love so he can live out his fantasy of destroying a church.
Don't be so glib and jaded.
I'm joking. I was amazed to which, he is, on paper at least, a secondary character, but he propels so much forward. He is the architect of what's going on to a large degree. He's the link between past and present with Braska's story and Yuna's story, so on. So Orin goes in the S tier.
Also, I like the fact that he falls into the sort of Japanese RPG trope of being like looking 55, but actually being 35. It's like he's the old man, which means he's over 30.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, who's next?
Warriors of Light.
So, of course, not a lot of characterization. We're putting concepts at D, right?
Yeah. I think concepts at D. I think they're historically significant because they were the first ever. I don't think overall. I think where Final Fantasy jumped off from them, it became better. Okay.
There's no personal connection to a tragic backstory, really. They just sort of show up and save the world.
Yeah. Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse.
Interesting.
Interesting.
I think they really handled them well in the new remake series. I sort of felt a lot more feelings towards them with my man heart compared to the original games. I especially feel strongly towards the spoilers, the demise of Jesse.
I think Jesse has the best arc in Final Fantasy Remake.
Yeah.
Like, once I was sort of started editing videos for Final Fantasy VII Remake, it really dawned on me like how it is basically her story to some extent, and she is the one who pays for their transgression in a way.
Even in the original game, they sort of tug the heartstrings a bit, despite having this early demise and stuff. So I do rank them highly. I don't think I'd put them higher than a C, but I'm happy to have
I would put. I mean, if we're ranking the group, I would put them on the B. Okay. I think that them as a group and their arcs are more interesting than Irvine and Fran.
Yeah. Okay. Lovely.
So, are these the best Biggs and Wedge in the Final Fantasy series? I really like Biggs and Wedge from Final Fantasy VIII.
They're my favorite as well. Yeah. I think they're fun.
Yeah. So I want to place these guys at C because
we have Jesse in the mix here, which
is I know. And if it was just Jesse, I would place it higher probably, which is strange.
It's 2 against 1. I'll allow it. It is what it is.
Yeah. Okay.
Because Biggs and Wedge, they don't get as much attention as Jessie. But Jessie on her own.
Well, Biggs gets a lot of airtime in Rebirth.
Yeah, but he doesn't do shit.
True. But he looks cool. He's handsome.
Are we going to go one more?
One more. Yeah.
One more for the road. Okay.
This hasn't been contentious enough. We're all just similar mind.
12.
Ash. Have you click the tier list again so we can see? I need to compare it to the other people on the list. So I'm leaning towards C because she has a lot of potential, but it isn't explored all that much, I feel. I like Ignis more than her.
We've put this wall between. Like, I also like Ignis more than her, but I also like her more than Genova or something. That's not true. Interesting.
Maybe she's B. She like.
Is she?
I like the way she speaks, and that's just because I like the way people in Final Fantasy 12 speak. And
I really like the voice acting. I think she has a pretty well-rounded arc. I'd put her as a B. I think.
She's on par pretty much with Ignis, like in a lot of ways. I think I can go with that too. Yeah. Look at us.
Yeah, let's do B.
Cool. I think the final result, I'd put my name to this.
Okay, guys. So we've done 15. We're 15 down. I think we've made some pretty good cases for and against the characters that we've done thus far. And I think we'll see how this does. Maybe we'll come back and return someday and do another tier list or finish up this tier list. But for now, thank you very much for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed Cait Sith's Wheel of Fun.
We have enjoyed Cait Sith's Wheel of Fun. Thanks for having us.
And for those watching, let us know if you agree or vehemently disagree with the tier list we've come up with thus far. And let us know who else you'd want to include and where. Okay, until next time. Nukvi, Peter, thank you very much for joining me. Be sure to go and check out the Birds at Play, everyone. And I'll see you again.
Bye.